cursed be the ground for our sake. Both thorns and thistles it shall bring forth for us. For out of the ground we were taken for the dust that we are, and to the dust we shall return. The From the Dust podcast features people who have had life-changing experiences. Here they share their stories and testimonials about how God can move and change a person's life. Welcome to the From the Dust podcast. Take a listen. Open your hearts and ears. Here's your host, James Science.
Yeah. Welcome back to another episode of From the Dust podcast, episode number 48. Man, wherever you are, what are you doing? Hope you are highly favored and highly blessed. If you have a story or testimony you want to share, go ahead and hit me up at From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. That's From the Dust podcast at outlook.com. Stories need to be told. Voices need to be heard. Man, you can check us out on Apple, Google, Spotify, YouTube. Man, if you can, go there and give us a review, 5-star rating. All that does is help us get seen on the platform. It helps our voices be seen and heard so we can reach the ones that need to be reached. Well, do I have a guest for you? He's going to come in and he's going to share his testimony, his story, man, and what God done in his life and the life-changing power. So we're going to go ahead and bring in our guest, Lorenzo Rivera. Lorenzo, man, how's it going, bro?
Oh man, hey, how's it going, man? I'd like to say what a blessing and what an honor it is, to be a part of, a portion of your ministry, man, and to go ahead and tell a story, man, a story that, that God just pulled miracles, and to again, I just want to give God all the glory and everything before I start, you know, is there anything you want to add, or we just go at it, man?
And let's get into it, man. I know you got an amazing story, so we'll go ahead. We'll start by where'd you grow up, man? How was your childhood?
So, I grew up. I'm the son of a doctor. My mom was his nurse, and we were privileged kids growing up. And as we were growing up, we kind of had everything we want, man. And we moved from Linwood to Whittier, California. And as we moved there, it was a transition, you know what I mean? And as I was going to school, I was on the borderline of a neighborhood and then where we lived. And it all started. We had a loving family. We took care of things, and as I started going to school, all the neighborhood kids in elementary that we started growing up with, second, third grade, we're all from this one particular neighborhood in Pico Rivera, and started hanging out with them, and they started making fun of me. You're a rich boy, yada yada yada. I didn't want to be known as that, you know what I mean? So I ended up a few years down the line. I was hanging out with them a lot. I ended up running away from home. They invited me to get jumped into the gang, the local gang that we were hanging out with. And the one thing I can honestly say is my stepfather was the one that raised me. Even though growing up the son of a doctor, my brothers and I, the way we lived, we didn't always have parents at home. So there was always one thing that was lacking, was me having my real father, and then also having a parental figure that was always in my life. It was always in and out, man. And so anyways, I get jumped into this neighborhood, and the guys, I was young. I think I was about 13, 12, 13 years old, man. And they just made me feel like loved. They wanted me around, and it felt good, you know what I mean? Because I was looking for acceptance, and as I was looking for acceptance, it was just step at a time. They started introducing to me, the first drugs, and everything started correlating off of that. And as I was growing up in the neighborhood, I ran away from home, and I had to make money on my own. You know what I mean? I was a dropout from school, and it was just it was a moment in my life where, you know, I really didn't live like a normal teenage life, because I got involved in the politics, got involved with collections, got involved with slanging, got involved with a lot of heavy stuff, man. And it was a fast life. It was a fast life, and my family, wanted to disown me. They didn't love me. They didn't care for me. I burned way too many bridges, and I was known as that guy. Like, hey, if he comes around, you just be careful. You know what I mean? And I took a lot in my teenage years. There was a lot of dirt that was pulled, and a lot of things. But I can tell you one thing: when there was a ministry called Victory Outreach, used to do all these heavy plays. Straight from the hood, cry of the young. We're talking about mid 90s, 95, 96. They came into my neighborhood one day, and they started, oh yeah, come on to the play, it's free, there's gonna be music, there's gonna be, it's gonna be live. I think the guy, he even invited us, there's gonna be hyenas and this and that, and we are just like, well, I looked at my homie, I said, hey, it's like 5 in the afternoon, we ain't got nothing going on, let's go see what's up. We get a free ride there and a free ride back. What more can we ask for? You know what I mean? Being 15 years old with no car, you're just kind of just running around and do whatever you want to do. So we end up going to the play, and as we're in the play, um, it was a heavy story, man. It was Cry of the Young. My buddy Junior Esquivel, he was one of the stars in it, but I didn't know anybody. It was just me, him, a gang of cholos, people from 18th Street, everywhere, Matavillas. Everybody was under one church roof, and we're talking about at least 150 people, James, 150, 200 people. We packed that out. Plus, there was lines going all the way around. So we get in there. The story touched me. They said, you know what, come to the altar. And something inside of me, then, I was just like, I don't care if my homeboy is looking, but I feel something inside of me. So I'm gonna go up there. So I did the whole thing. They said, lift your hands, pray, say the sinner's prayer. And then from that day forward, that's when God interrupted my life. You know what I mean? And from after going back to the neighborhood that day, something was different. You know what I mean? And it's one of those things that you really can't explain. But as I started continuing my life, doing what I was doing in the streets, um, there was quite a few points and times. I had gotten jumped. I got stabbed in the back. A lot of different things. Were taking place, being shot at. And there's nothing more eye opening when you're hearing bullets flying by your head. The sound. It's scary. You don't know if you dodge left or dodge right, you're gonna get a hole in your head. You know what I mean? So fast forward as we're going through everything. I end up going into the home. This ministry provides, a type of a rehabilitation home. So I go into the home, and God starts doing something inside of me, man. And you know, uh, he just kept, I have a call for you, I have a plan for you, and I always fought it. I always fought that feeling, and it was just like when things wouldn't go right, I would pick up and run, man, and just go ahead and go back to normally what I knew how to do. And throughout my life, Victory Outreach is a great ministry. I have a lot of friends. I grew up with a lot of people. Pastor Sonny Jr., Tim Arganzoni. I mean, I grew up with a lot of them.
Hey, look,
You know,
what's sorry, PO, my dad actually was pastor for many years,
oh,
bro.
okay,
Many
really?
years. Yeah, so I'm real familiar with the ministry and the drama.
Okay,
So like, man, and everything you
damn,
mentioned, yeah, I've seen them grow up,
right,
interact with them. So I'm
absolutely.
in another ministry now, but I have a lot of love, and everything that I was taught came from the
Right.
ministry through outreach.
Same,
Yeah,
same here. I'm with a different ministry, but I have plenty of friends from there, man. I mean, we still interact, we still talk, and they've been on my podcast already. And but anyways, to before we deflect from that story, as my life continued, I didn't know how to be an adult. My mom passes away at the age of 24. My biggest vice ended up becoming alcohol. I started becoming a drinker, man, because it's always there. It was one of the easiest things to get. The more you drink, the more you forget about stuff. You know what I mean? And that's what became my biggest vice, man. And that always led to dope, cocaine, everything. It was always a door opener. God has always done things for me. God has always opened doors. For being a high school dropout, man, I've had some amazing jobs like, I was making very good money at a very early age. And, I always worked my way up from the bottom. And and I always made good money. But the one thing I always failed at was being successful. By the time I had good money, I was afraid to go to the next step, and I'd always blow it. I'd start drinking, start doing drugs, boom, start all over, end up back in the home again. You know what I mean? It was kind of like a cycle, And as I was going through all that, um, I get I get married, and then it was all wrong. You know what I mean? I did things outside of the way God wanted me to do them. I wanted to rush things and do things, and as I tried doing things on my own, James, like everything kept messing up, man. And I was just like, man, why do I keep going through this stuff? I mean, I get on the right path and do this, and I would just beat myself up, man. And I remember one time where I was drinking, and I was like, man, God, why am I even talking to you? You know what I mean? Like, well, I don't even know what's up with me. And I remember falling on my knees, and I was like, you know what? I know I've said this prayer many times, but if you're real, do something, man. I'm tired of being like this, again, he interrupted my life, and things started happening, and then he started moving in my life, man. And from somebody that grew up in the streets, ran away, had to deal with all that stuff, and halfway through starting getting, a ministry starts interrupting your life. It was like, man, there's something that, why do I keep going back to this ministry? What is it about it? And it was just God telling me, like, hey, I'm not done with you. I have a calling. I told you I interrupted your life. I told you at that altar that I'm going to do something with you. So yeah, it was a heavy young and fast life, man, dealing with a lot of drugs, a lot of politics, in and out of jail. Like, it was the same thing over and over and over. I mean, I was left for dead a couple times, man, and for some reason somebody happened to pass by and call the police, and I get the ambulance, and they come pick me up, and next thing you know it, I wake up in the hospital like, man, what are you serious? Like, I was that close to death a few times. And I thank God for preserving my life. I thank God for, even all the unseen stuff that I did, that it was preserved, that I didn't get life behind bars. I wasn't made to go in a prison, to be inside of a prison cell. I would, for some reason, all the crooked stuff that I did, I never got caught. Not saying that I was a good crook or anything, you know what I mean? But God always had preserved my life, because he knew I wasn't meant to blend in with the crowd. I was meant to stick out. You know what I mean? And I truly believe that. Yourself. We're not meant to blend in, man. When we're part of God, and we have a kingdom mentality, we're meant to stick out, because that's what he did when he was on this earth, man. You know what I mean? And now as we fast forward into my adulthood, a lot of things were taking place, James, again, alcohol was my biggest thing, and it held on to me, man. I honestly never, I would be like, okay, good, I'm not gonna drink. I'd go 30 days, boom, I drink again. And it became a cycle in that, man. And I never went a year without having a drink. Like, it was just consistent. Like, I always messed up somewhere and always went back to it you know so finally, fast forward, I catch a break, and I decide to up and leave. And I had met my wife. She was at a world a women's conference in Ontario. We started talking. She lived in Utah, and I was like, oh man, that's crazy. So we started talking for about a good year, and then finally, like, about a year after, like, we made the decision, like, let's meet, let's do all this. And we ended up doing that, right? So didn't know what I was getting into, knew everything, and made the move. Came out here, I was like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, I don't know what's gonna happen. And okay, let's see what happens. Um and as I made it, I mean, as soon as I got here, like, I got a job within, I was like a maintenance supervisor for an apartment complex, making like 20 bucks an hour. And I was just like, oh, that's a good start. So I started doing that. And then it was funny, Victory Outreach came back into my life again. You know what I mean? There was a church out here. And I was like, all right, well, my wife told me, hey, you know what? Tim Arganzoni is gonna be here. I know that's your friend. Do you want to go visit him? So okay, cool. I was believing at the time, but I wasn't as going at it as like I am now. And so we go out there, we go visit him, and then again, that was my plug back in. You know what I mean? That was God telling me, you can't run from me no matter what. I am gonna be on you. You know what I mean? I'm gonna be on you like white on rice. And and he has never given up, man. So my wife was born with epilepsy. And this is a good story. And I was afraid to answer my phone, man, because um I was afraid that I was gonna get a phone call that she had crashed, she had a seizure, people around her died, and that I was living in fear. I was like, man. So, anyways, one day, Pastor Benny from Las Vegas, my wife was having a 7 day stay at the university because the medication wasn't working anymore. And I was like, man, what's next? So they had her on a stay. They put the nodes all over her head, and she had to sleep there for 7 days. On the second to last day, the pastor asked, hey, can I go pray for her? Yeah, so we go and we pray for, and he prays for her and like whispers in her ear, and I'm just kind of like in the background, like, man, God, I've asked you to do miracles before. You know what I mean? Like, what are you gonna do? So, anyways, the last night comes up, the doctors call, and I'm kind of like, okay, well, what's happening? Are they gonna release her? And then so I go. It's 10 o'clock at night. I remember, I go straight to the hospital, and we're kind of just looking at each other, and the doctor comes in and says, you know what? We're looking at the records and everything, and it looks like your wife has nothing. There's no trace. There's no sign. There's no activity. Because when you have epilepsy, there's epileptic activity always constantly going on. And they looked at it and were like, we don't know what happened. It's Nothing is there. You went from full blown epilepsy to having nothing at all. Like, what's going on? So, and they were like, we're reluctant to say. I mean, like, we want to say like you're healed. We don't know what happened. So that was kind of God again worked in her life, but showing me, stop doubting who I am, man. And her dream was always to be in law enforcement and stuff. So she recently, last 7 months ago, she joined the police academy. She graduates in the next couple weeks. When you're epileptic, you can't do that type of occupation. You can't hold a gun, you can't drive a car, you can't, there's nothing you can do. So she graduates in the next like 30 days, and then she gets offered, a position right before she graduates. And God's moving. So I'm saying all that to say, I had started a podcast. God gave me a vision, and just said, "Hey, I want you to do something. I want you to do something different than what everybody's doing. I've been preparing you. I've been preparing you since 2020. Something's gonna happen. I started a business. I had a full time. I had a great career, the most money I've ever made in my life. You know, uh, I started a great business, and then after that, it was the podcast. God was just like, I want you to start something. So I started doing my research and started talking. And then, I didn't know how, it was just burning in my heart. And I was like, I got to do something. So I started doing it, and everything just started falling into place. And through the podcast, trip out on this, through the podcast, it's called, you don't mind if I throw a plug in real
Go
quick.
ahead. Go ahead. Shoot it.
finding Finding Faith podcast. And the reason why I wanted to say it is because word started getting around in Salt Lake City, uh to like different people, and then I guess a police department caught wind of it. And I got a phone call from a detective, and he was like, hey man, heard your podcast. You sound like a genuine person. We need inspiration in our high school, a class that I teach. And I was like, "You, wow, are you serious?" I'm like, "Man, I used to run from cops. I used to avoid them, and then all of a sudden, they're now reaching out to me to help, inspire the youth. So I jumped on the opportunity. I said, Of course, I would love to help make a difference. And let me tell you something, James. I had posted a picture of it. I had pictures of me throwing up gang signs and how I looked back then, bald head, Frisco Benz jerseys, the whole bit. And there was about 25 high school students there. And he tells me in the beginning, Lorenzo, these kids aren't really very interactive. They're very dry. They're uppity little rich white kids. And I was like, I can relate to them right off the bat. So, anyways, as I started talking, I started asking them a couple questions intentionally, and then as I got into the story, everybody went from being on their phones to the phones being face down on their tables. And in one of the pictures you can see like everybody's just like looking up like in awe. It was amazing. It was an amazing privilege. So at the end, the detective told me, he goes, look, they're not going to ask you many questions, man. Just let's get to your point. Do what you can. You can drop your podcast off. I want you to try to promote it. And I said, oh, cool, man. So at the end of it, when I was starting to land everything, there's a Victory Outreach quote for you. As I took it in for a landing, um, their hands started going up, man. I must have answered over 50 to 70 questions. I can't, it was just one right after another, one right after another. The beauty of it was, it's tough because, being in Utah, there's it's a religious state, there's a lot of Mormons out here. It's a little bit it's different. But, when the glory of God works, boundaries start to move. You know what I mean? Mountains start to move. And I kept like dropping in little seeds like, hey, if it wasn't for the man upstairs, I'm telling you, I would not even be here right now. One of those bullets should have hit me. The blood that was coming out of my back after I was stabbed should have all poured out. It was 2 millimeters away from my spinal cord. You know what I mean? The times I got jumped and was like left paralyzed. I couldn't feel my body. I can't even tell you the times of how much pain and hurt, and even being in the rooms with killers. We'd be there with drug deals. And it was just it was being so scared that if any of the drugs or money ends up missing, that amount of drugs, your family gets offed, man. And that's what was scary, because they all had pictures of my family, and I'm there 16 years old with the 45 on my waist, homeboy, with a backpack full of dope, and we're there in a shoddy hotel room doing, a couple $1,000 deals, and as I was, talking about all this, I just see their eyes open up. Then you get the question, James. Now we fast forward to politics. You know what I mean? Then you get, because in my life, let me give you a quick background. As I was growing up, there was one sheriff. There was one sheriff named Sheriff Steve Pingaron. I can never forget this guy. He would always, in the neighborhood, he would always pull over and say, Lorenzo, get in the car. What are you doing? Get in the car. He would always like try to catch me by myself, and he would talk to me. He would try to be that mentor in the streets. And I was like, all right, well, this is cool and all, but then there was the PD of Pico Rivera, where they would beat us down, and they would drop us off in our enemies' neighborhoods, and we'd try to escape. They would like knew where they were partying, they knew where they were hanging out. So at 1 in the morning, a cop car pulls over like a couple houses down, where there's a group of them, and they would unhandcuff us, and then they would zip out, and we're stuck trying to run through the alleys and trying to get away from these guys, with the fear of our lives. So I hated police, you know. But that one sheriff kept coming back, kept coming back. When I got stabbed, he showed up at the hospital. I don't know how he found out where I was, but he knew where I was and he showed up. And that's when I started seeing there's more to this than just hating a company or an organization. So um, that's what got asked to me in this class. One of the little girls asked me, "What is your take on what happened last year with the whole George Floyd thing?" And I wasn't prepared for it. But you know what? I go, look, people will be people no matter what. You cannot put a label on an organization because somebody is gonna ruin it. So what happened with the Georges, that's unfortunate. You know what I mean? But again, racism is real, but you have to be a thoughtful and caring human being and not jump on the bandwagon of other people's conclusions. You know what I mean? You have to love from within, and I would quote little scriptures here and there. I would throw them in, and I kind of watch to see who was catching it. You know what I mean? Because hey, man, when you're filled with God, bro, like it's gonna come out. You know what I mean? The God you know is the God you show. Come on, somebody. You know what I mean? Like, and that's the truth. The God that I know, he's a loving God, caring God, fulfilling God, and that's what I'm full of. So, as I was teaching this class, I was I was seeing something new happen, James. Something new, like a younger generation now starting to understand the fact, of actually seeing the reality of what life is, and now how to join the two together. Because in high school, I don't know about your high school, but my high school, everybody was just like, yeah, f the police, forget them, yada yada yada. That's every high school for me. If you ask me, that's the mentality you get. And then you got the little two or three explorers walking around in their little suits. But I started seeing something different, and head started nodding, and like, wow, I kind of get what you're saying. So when and I felt God moving right there, because, as I was telling my story, I had the privilege of this is, God changed my life. And, I got to get in a good little couple jabs about God. And then, after that, at the end of it, the detective, comes from me to the side and he goes, hey, man, you know, um, that was absolutely amazing. He goes, I'm not a religious guy, I'm not a Mormon or anything. If they're Mormon, they tell you I'm LDS. That's their little code word. I'm LDS. I'm LDS. But he was like, I'm not Mormon or anything. But he goes, I would like to get you to come back, and I want you speaking in our schools. And I was shocked, because I was like, when I went to this new ministry, I was kind of like, okay, now I'm just gonna sit in the background. I want to receive, and and I just want to listen. I want God to talk to me, and as I sat in the church, and I felt God and everything, but then it got quiet for a minute, and I was like, man, what's going on? I'm feeling very idled right now. And for people like you and I, when you start getting idle, you start getting anxious. And then when you start getting anxious, you start making your own moves. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, yeah.
and that's the truth, man. And as I was sitting there, all of this started slowly unfolding, step by step by step. And that's it's kind of like when you're taking a test, the teacher's in the room, but it's quiet. He's watching you, he's watching what's going on, how you're going to react, how you're going to respond, but and as I sat there, God quickened me and said, look, I told you I wasn't done with you. I told you back then I wasn't done with you. Look at what you're doing. You may be a 40-year-old man, but you're the man that people now look to for answers. So for what God has done in my life, he took a no good, uneducated gang member, drug addict, alcoholic, a man that couldn't be trusted, was a black sheep of the family, turned him into somebody that people can look at. Not only that, started his own business. Not only that, now life coaches teenagers. Not only that, um, God's just pouring in an abundance of answered prayer. You know what I mean? I consult, young guys that started businesses. I'm like a business consultant. You know what I mean? And what he's doing, he's not done. He's continuing to move. Continuing to impress me, because every day that goes by, I'm like, I'm not worthy of this, man. I am the last person, and it was funny, James, because I was just having a conversation earlier, um, with a couple people, and I was like, man, your family calls you a lot. How was your relationship with your family? I was like, wow, that was kind of a personal question. That was like random. You just like popped that out there. And I go, the funny thing is, they all hated me. They all didn't want me in their homes. They didn't want me around, their spouses. They didn't want me anywhere in the proximity of wherever they were, and I look back, and as he asked me that, I just kind of like, man, now they're calling me for prayer. They're calling me for advice. They're calling me for different types of things, and it kind of blew me away, man, because I was just like, man, God, the way that you work. I was an outcast, and now it's like you're moving in a way that I can't even describe. You know what I mean? There's so much going on in my life, James, that I have a lot of lanes, and in all of these lanes, they have to be managed. Being a father, being a husband, being a business owner, having a career, being a life coach, being, having a podcast, speaking into people's lives, teaching people how to run a business. Like all of these lanes, it's like, wow, you have really, really moved, and you've really, watered these crops for what you're doing. And I thank God for everything He's doing, man. And what you're doing, it's an absolute blessing, man. We are the voice of God for Him. You know what I mean? We're His voice. We're bringing it, because the way I see it is, when you have a podcast, you're the audio Bible. You know what I mean? And I say that because, and I say this with great like honor, because we're kingdom minded. It was funny because when I first started going live on Facebook, I had both of my mother-in-laws. So, both of my mother-in-laws chime in on the same live, and I was like, "Whoa, look, there is a God. I can't believe you guys are both watching me right now." You
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
and it's touching, because it's like they won't step foot in a church, man. They won't read the Bible, but they will listen to what I have to say. And it's like, what an honor it is that if I can, be God's ambassador to those that will only listen. Like, it's amazing, man. So yeah, that's kind of my story, man. I didn't want to get too detailed into my past, because I really want to highlight God, in everything, because in all in all, He is the one that made all of this possible, not me. You know what I mean? All of this wasn't just luck, wasn't just Lorenzo. It was the power of God, the life changing power of God, and the persistence of Him. It's when He touches you, man, and He's not gonna let you go. So I appreciate sharing my story, man. I'm
yeah, man.
blessed.
I appreciate you coming on, and everything you spoke of can relate, man. Because for a long time, I rap group in the ministry, bro.
Yeah,
And you know the word, and and you see, growing up in church and ministry, you see and experience like God changing power, right? But
right.
still, you still want to do what you want to do.
Mm,
And it took me a very long time, and it took me to some very dark places to finally realize that God brought me through a lot. And there was a lot that I went through that I could have ended up dead.
yeah.
For some reason, how did bro, I survived car accidents where I flipped over 12 times. Have gun pulled on me, and the guy pulled the trigger and that didn't go off. And I'm like, I look back and why? I should be dead, but God has a plan, bro.
Yeah.
And just like you, God gave you that dream to do the podcast. I had to step into this church, bro, and I was just going to go there, just stay here because
Hmm.
I had friends that go there. But that wasn't God's plan. I stood there, and right when I got there, He put me to action. You listen to a podcast, start a podcast. You have a love for people and the stories. You share the stories. I just got involved, and every day I do more and do more for them. And it's only because of God that I have the dreams that I have, and I
Yeah.
have the life that I have, and I have the love for the people that I have. So my story might be as deep as you, but I can relate a lot, bro. And like I have people, friends and family, but they don't go to church, but they listen to the
Right.
program. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Well, they listen. Oh, I heard the story. Like um my ex, my baby mama, she don't go to church, she's not religious, but they listen to the podcast religiously,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? And that's all that matters to me, is that if someone hears our stories, bro, and they're moved by it and they're changed, and then I know I'm doing the work of God, and I know that I'm pleased and He's pleased with me, and that makes me happy, and that makes me know I'm doing a job well done.
Absolutely, man. And I mean, it's funny because my kids are my biggest fans. They love listening to it. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? So,
yeah, yeah.
and it trips me out because they love listening to me when I preach. They like, actually, when I podcast. They love sitting like on the floor just listening to what's going on. And God's not done, man. He's got so much in store, and I'm so excited how your podcast, it's gonna continue to blow up, man. It's gonna continue. You made it all the way to Utah. You know what I mean? You're gonna
Yeah.
keep expanding. You know what I'm saying? And as he continues to move, he's gonna continue, to use you as that tool. To use me as that tool. To benefit the kingdom. You know what I mean? So just again, to be a guest on your podcast, man, what an honor it is. Thank you for reaching out. It means a lot. And whoever is listening to this, just know, you're not listening to this as just a radio station, or you're not listening to this just to pass time. God has a plan for you. All you got to do is, don't be too anxious for answers. Just know that he's there. And that's kind of the number one key that I've kind come to realize. God, I don't need answers. I just need to know you're with me. And he's there with you right now as you're listening to this podcast. And may he bless your ways. As you continue to move forward. You take these stories, you talk about stories. Start turning people on to the Dust podcast. From the Dust podcast, you know what I mean. Get people, invite people to this podcast, because the more people, a good message isn't meant to stay in between ears. You know what I mean. It's not meant to stay right here. It's, we were given two ears and a mouth. It's meant to be spoken about for more people to hear. So if you're listening to this, I encourage you to share it, because people need to hear what God can do and what he continues to do. He is a reviver of the family. He will heal the drug addict. He will mend broken hearts. Whatever it is that your heart's desire is, he'll give it to you. But again, somebody else may need to hear this. So I encourage you, share this, get the word out there, because this is a form of evangelism, and people need to hear some good news for a change.
Hey man, you hit it right on the spot. Usually before I end, I always give the guest speak their heart. But man, I think as God given telling you have, and you as a host of your own podcast, you hit it right on the head, man. Right on the nail, bro. Before we go,
Yeah.
where can we find you? Your podcast, the name, your social media. Where can people reach out to you and find all your stuff?
So you can find Finding Faith podcast. You can find it on Spotify, Apple Music. There's a few other ones, but if you open up whatever application that you use, you can just easily spot it on Spotify or Apple Music. Just type in Finding Faith podcast. It's in black and white, and it just says Finding Faith. Just pop in there, and we continue to touch lives through it. So hope to see you guys there soon. Continue to share, and let's change lives.
That's right. If you have a story or testimony you want to share, go ahead and hit it from this podcast at outlook.com. That's from this podcast at outlook.com. Stories need to be told. Voices need to be heard. Like, share, subscribe, get the word out there. God is good. Yeah. And before we go, we got a message for you.
Therefore, if any man be in Christ, he is a new creature. All things are passed away. Behold, all things become new.
Y'all be blessed. Be sure to check out Finding Faith Podcast. We'll see you again. Be blessed.